In our last session, we talked about the executive faculties of mind. And I talked primarily about the will faculty, our capacity to be directive in our lives. But as with all the faculties, as we said, we have one side of the dyad of two faculties. One is the active side, and one is the passive side. One is the more positive or negative. Again, not in terms of bad, but just in terms of polarity. And so we talked about the importance of will and having intention. But as the passive or balancing faculty for that, we have understanding. Understanding is our capacity of mind to deal with our experiences, both inwardly and outwardly, and to rationalize them, to find meaning in them. And out of that meaning, we direct our will in almost all instances. Most of our everyday life is lived in our head. That is, it isn't something that you feel or think about. I said it in our head. I want to say that a little differently. I should say it's lived at an unconscious level. We just find that we get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we grab our breakfast, we get in the car, we go to work, and the experts tell us that at least 65% of all that action is you're not thinking about it. That is, it's already been programmed into you, and that has been built up in the portion of your executive faculty that we call understanding. It is, again, memories of how things are done, how things relate to each other, and how you want to act in that terms. So that you get out of bed, you know you got to get out of bed because you got to go to work, and you know before you do that, you got to brush your teeth, and you got to have a little something to eat, and you have to get the car, etc. So most of your life is lived on the basis of our understanding faculty, which directs then the other half of our executive faculty, our will. So we will ourselves to brush our teeth, we will ourselves to eat breakfast, we will ourselves to get in the car and go to work. And then the whole day unfolds that way. So these are our executive faculties of mind. One of the things that we need to know about the understanding faculty is that it is unfortunate that most people today, this is meant to be a put down, it's just where we are from the evolutionary standpoint. Most people live their lives at the level of their understanding, not at the level of wisdom. Because you remember, wisdom is gained by intuitive insights and knowingness. And that is only gained by having an association with God, however you call that God, whether you just want to think there's a universal mind and I love what it has done and I want to be one with it. By opening ourselves to that oneness of thought, we gain access to the wisdom of the universe, which might tell us in many instances to live our lives a little differently than the way we're geared to run it by our own understanding, the use of our understanding faculty. I think we need to appreciate that our Creator didn't intend us to have to always be going to home for directions. That is, we don't always have to be tuning into our wisdom to make our lives work out for us. That we were given the capacity to understanding to do 65% of our days without having to really work at it. But on the other hand, when it comes to things like, what am I going to do with my life? What will really make me happy? Well, that is not a time to go to your understanding. Because, you see, that would work if you were just an animal per se. But you have to appreciate that you are so much more than that. You are an expression of God's own thought about what He would like us to become and to be. And therefore, if you choose to think, as I do, that the creative mind of the universe has a special place where you can find your fulfillment, your happiness, your prosperity, and it will guide you to it if you tune in. But we get so geared up to doing things with our own understanding, which is in most cases our intellectualizing, that we don't tune in and get that spiritual direction. What we do is that we don't really do it, it's done to us. That is, we go to school and right away people start to say, what do you want to do? What are you going to do with your life? Well, and you're still young and you haven't even thought about it very much. You say, well, I don't know. Well, you might want to study this or that, and maybe your parents will say, you know, doctors make awfully good livings. You know, well, maybe I'll be a doctor, or maybe I'll be a lawyer, or maybe I don't want to be anything. I want to be a mechanic because I enjoy mechanic. And that last thing could be right for you, or being the doctor, the lawyer could be right for you, but there's only one way to really know, and that is to take the time to attune yourself of the wisdom of God, to either read the signs of your own life, which often work to point you in a certain direction, or to hear it intuitively that I really want to be a star. We hear some of our great movie actors or actresses say, you know, when I was a kid I just knew I wanted to be a star. I wanted to get on the stage and express myself. So and those come as intuitive flashes from this mind that knows what's best for us. But I want to underscore the fact that most of us are trained to make intellectual decisions. About the big issues of life, that's not a good idea. About brushing your teeth in the morning, that's a good idea. So, this is part of the importance that I put into understanding your faculties of mind. How to use them, when to use them, which times we need to bring forth certain of our faculties. It's like, again, talking about the bending of the spoons, you know. It's one thing to know that love can give you access to that spoon, but you're not really going to make it work until you bring will and intention into it. So you've got to have that other faculty up to the front. All the other faculties are working, and they're contributing to some degree, but there are certain faculties that come to the foreground. And in our case of understanding and will, this is very, very important for us. Nothing could be unfortunate for us, and that is to use our will in the wrong way. Many of us have heard the word willpower, and that's a good word because will can be so strong, our intentions can be so strong and unclarified by understanding or sometimes wisdom that we can get ourselves in so much trouble. And so people talk about it and say, oh, they're so willful. They're so willful, meaning they want to be in charge. They want to have control. I mean, that's most people who are inclined to be very willful are high control people. High control people. You know, we've talked about the location of these energy centers in the body, and I told you in our last session that will, I think, is fairly located in the executive lobes of the brain, the will on the left side of our frontal lobes, and understanding would be on the right side. And again, if you read what they have discerned by testing which sides of the brain make things happen for us, you'll find that they fit very nicely. That understanding is on this right side and that will is on the left side. There is another portion of our body that very clearly is related to the development of the executive faculties, and that's our hands. One of the great unfoldments of evolution that indicated that it was through the primates that the evolutionary chain was going to unfold was the development in the primates of the use of their hands, because these are an expression of the executive faculties of mind. It's not surprising that you find sometimes that people who have arthritis in their hands, that the tendency that many humans have toward arthritis, which center and show most clearly in the hands, are people who have a desire for high control. That is, they are extremely willful, and not always with great understanding. Once when I was moved to have my staff at the church undergo a psychological testing, it was supposed to show what types of personalities that we all had, because I wanted all the staff members to get along, to appreciate each other, and perhaps to understand each other's differences. And I was always struck by the fact that in the tests of about 14 people, 2 people there came up to be in people of high control. And in both cases, there were only 2 that clearly showed arthritis in the knuckles of their hands. So, anyway, these body centers are such a reflection of our faculties of mind, and it can be very meaningful for us as we understand what's happening in our bodies and the use we're making of our minds. Well, so now we've discussed the executive faculties, and we're ready to go to 2 extremely important faculties too that have come out of our growth of being reflective. And they are the faculties which I call the manifesting faculties. The manifesting faculties of mind. Today it's not uncommon when you read books about the power of consciousness that you find the author referring to us as co-creators with God. Co-creators, as we make things happen. But I have some difficulty with that, and I choose to say, no, there's only one creator, and that creator is God. But we are manifestors of this dimension of life. This is a unique dimension that we live in, and I'm not sure that we've talked about the different dimensions and the fact that we live in this dimension, and then when we have our passing, we move to another dimension. But whether I have or not, let me say that it is a fact that this dimension that we live in is a dimension of slowed down energy. All life is nothing but formed energy. Your bodies are but formed energy because they are slowed down energy to a point where they become what we call solids. And the manifesting capacity that we have with these 2 next faculties we're going to talk about is our ability to shape that energy and to change energy that may already be established. The first faculty of the manifesting faculties that we're going to talk about is the action faculty, and it is the faculty of faith. The faculty of faith. Faith is the conceiving power of mind, the ability of mind to conceive of a resultant, of an idea made form. An incredibly important faculty, and one that clearly Jesus gave so much attention to. There are 2 things I think of when I think of Jesus' ministry that stand out. One is, of course, the faculty of love. He brought to this world of ours an expression of love that they had never known before. And I don't think many people realize that prior to Jesus entering into the world, there's been no powerful philosophy launched that would have that suggested that life should be anything but cruel. Life was difficult, except for the personal relationships of family and kin and small civilized groups. There was no thought that we should live by love. And so people went to war with each other at the drop of a hat, and cruelty in so many expressions was prevalent in the world. And Jesus came into this world and said that love is the greatest power on earth, and that love is the answer to all of life's experiences and challenges. Nobody had ever brought us that before. Well, we've talked about love, so I want to say the other thing that Jesus brought us was an awareness of the power of the manifesting power of faith. Faith is our capacity to move into the world of energy to make changes. When we can conceive what our reality is. When we conceive what our reality really is. And so over and over we have Jesus saying to people that he assumedly healed. He said, "Thy faith has made thee whole." Your faith did it. What inspired people to use their own faith was Jesus. And sometimes his laying on of hands, or with the blind man, I believe he took mud and put it on his eyes. But what Jesus did and the power he radiated to that person was the ability to quicken them to use their own faith faculty to perceive that they were healed. That they were healed. In one of our earlier sessions, I'm quite sure I told you about the man who was so crippled, 20 years in a wheelchair, and a Catholic priest came to him in one of the healing meetings he was conducted and said to this man sitting in the wheelchair who hadn't stood for 20 years, he said to him, "We're going to walk out of here together," and just reached out his hand. But so powerful was the word that this man spoke, and this man's receptivity to that word, that he instantly clicked in his own manifesting capacity, and he stood up on muscles that were completely atrophied, the muscles in his legs. He stood up and he walked out of the front door of the church with that priest. And I love to tell the story. He went out and celebrated with his friends all night and went to his doctor's house and in the middle of the night. And the doctor practically had a heart attack himself when he opened the door and saw this guy standing up, because he had been tending to this man for a good part of 20 years. So faith is an incredible power to change the energy of our manifest world by conceiving what our reality is. And so if we can conceive that my reality is I am perfect and whole. The movement called Christian Science, which has been with us for, well, since the early part of last century, through the work of Mary Baker Eddy, has received a tremendous following and is still very active in our world today, because their work is based upon helping people to conceive life different, to conceive that they can be healed. And they have many examples of this happening. However, they also have examples of people who have endeavored to get their healing by believing they're going to be healed. But there's a big difference between just believing and conceiving that it's your reality. And it's the faith faculty that determines that. And unless our faith faculty is matured to the point that we can really conceive the ends we desire, we're not going to be able to change or manifest the energy fields that we live in. So we have to go past, with our faith faculty, we have to go past the level of believing. Belief is a beginning toward the fulfillment of the full use of the faith faculty. So we want to work with that often, and it's like all of our faculties. You can build them by practicing using them. And the simplest form, and we talked about it before again, is finding a parking place. I mean, there's no big resultant to be concerned about in that. And so if you want to just practice knowing that every time you go where you need to go, there's going to be a perfect parking place for you, you'll find that it will always happen over and over again. Someone will be just pulling out about the time you get there. And somebody say, "Oh, yeah, it's chance." Yeah, it happens by chance, but when it happens over and over again, it's your faith faculty warming up. Well, we'll talk more about this in the next session.